The evening sky had settled into a bruised shade of purple when Jack Marley gathered his unusual allies in the main hall of the Marley Inn. The wooden floorboards creaked underfoot, and the flickering candlelight cast long, dancing shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Despite the inn's dilapidated charm, tonight it felt like a fortress brimming with hope and mischief. Jack stood at the center, rubbing his hands together nervously but forcing a grin. "All right, team," he said, voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his head. "Marvin's making his move. He's hired some heavy hitters, troublemakers, really to scare us off. But we're not going down without a fight." Eleanor's translucent form shimmered into view, a playful smirk tugging at the corners of her spectral lips. "Oh, they have no idea what they're in for," she teased, her voice like the tinkling of distant wind chimes. The other ghosts flickered around her, their ethereal faces alight with anticipation. Tommy cracked his knuckles, the familiar grin spreading wide. "I've got the tools and a few tricks up my sleeve," he promised, taking in the group assembled before him. Sally adjusted her glasses, clutching a stack of old blueprints and legal documents. "And I'll keep the paperwork straight. We'll make sure Marvin's threats don't hold water." Jack felt a swell of gratitude. This ragtag band, part living, part dead, was his last, best hope. As the rain began to patter softly against the windows, a tense silence fell. Outside, the faint rumble of engines signaled the arrival of Marvin's hired troublemakers. Their footsteps echoed ominously on the porch, heavy and purposeful. Jack moved to the front door, heart pounding. He unlocked it and peeked outside. A group of burly men, clad in dark coats and grim expressions, were already casing the property. Marvin himself lingered at the edge of the driveway, his predatory smile gleaming even in the dim light. Inside, Eleanor whispered, "Let's show them the true meaning of hospitality." Suddenly, a gust of cold wind swept through the room, rattling the windows and sending a flurry of papers skittering across the floor. The troublemakers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the invisible presence. The battle for the Marley Inn had begun. Moments later, the troublemakers stepped onto the porch, their boots slapping against the rain-soaked wood. Just as one reached for the door handle, a sudden cascade of silverware erupted from the windowsill, spinning in a dizzying vortex around them. The clatter and clang sent a few scrambling backward with startled yelps. From the shadows, Eleanor's laughter echoed, a light, teasing sound that only the inn's defenders could hear. Objects levitated and twirled, chairs slid across the floor, paintings tilted askew, and a chandelier swayed dangerously overhead. The men's frustration grew palpable, but so did their confusion. Jack slipped out from behind the door, waving a flashlight and shouting, "You're trespassing on private property. Leave now or face consequences." His voice was firm, but the jittery edge betrayed his nerves. Marvin stepped forward, his smile never faltering. "This isn't over, Marley. You'll regret standing in my way." Inside, Tommy rigged a makeshift tripwire near the staircase, while Sally called a local attorney to prepare for a potential legal showdown. The ghosts, meanwhile, orchestrated their spectral symphony of chaos with gleeful precision. As the night deepened, the inn transformed into a theater of the absurd. One moment, a cold breeze whispered down the hall. The next, a door slammed shut of its own accord. A startled troublemaker found himself lifted off the floor, suspended by invisible hands before being gently set down with a bewildered grunt. Jack watched the scene unfold, half amused, half exhausted. "You're doing great, Eleanor," he murmured, ducking a flying pillow. "Just keep it up." Eleanor floated beside him, glowing softly, with pleasure. They don't know who they're messing with. Hours passed in a blur of laughter, shouts, and ghostly pranks. Marvin's men, increasingly rattled, began to retreat in disarray. Outside, the local townsfolk, roused by the commotion, gathered near the street, whispers of support spreading like wildfire. At last, Marvin backed away, his expression darkening. "This isn't finished," he hissed before disappearing into the night. Jack closed the door, leaning against it with a wary smile. The inn was safe for now. but the battle lines were drawn, and the final showdown loomed on the horizon. Eleanor hovered beside him, her eyes bright with mischief and loyalty. "Ready for round two?" she asked. Jack laughed, the sound echoing through the empty halls. "Always." And with that, the Marley Inn braced itself for the chaos, laughter, and unexpected friendships that lay ahead. Jack Marley stood at the threshold of the Marley Inn, the pale light of dawn casting long, trembling shadows across the weather-worn path. His heart thumped in a rhythm that matched the creaking timbers and rustling leaves. But beneath the tension was a seed of excitement. Today was the day Marvin Delaney had decided to escalate his campaign, and Jack was ready not just with courage, but with a plan that was as unconventional as the inn itself. The garden, wild and tangled from neglect, suddenly stirred. From behind the gnarled branches, Eleanor the poltergeist appeared, her translucent form shimmering with an otherworldly glow. She smiled slyly, her vintage dress fluttering like a flag caught in a spectral breeze. A sudden gust swept through the garden, rattling shutters and flickering the old lanterns, signaling the start of their ghostly gambit. "Ready, Jack?" Eleanor's voice chimed with playful menace. Jack grinned, adjusting his worn jacket. "Born ready. Let's show them what a haunted inn can do." Marvin's hired men, dressed in sharp suits that seemed absurd against the backdrop of creeping ivy and cracked stone, advanced cautiously. Their footsteps were muffled by the damp earth, their faces tight with the grim determination of mercenaries, ill-prepared for a supernatural duel. Eleanor zipped between shadows, her hands weaving invisible patterns that coaxed eerie whispers from the walls. Inside, Jack and Tommy were a whirlwind of frantic activity. Kitchen utensils transformed into traps, loose floorboards rigged to trip, and old paintings hung just so to startle. The air was thick with the scent of dust and anticipation. "Watch your step here," Tommy warned as he ducked behind a rickety table. Suddenly, a crash echoed from the hallway. One of Marvin's men had tripped, sending a cacophony of pots and pans crashing to the floor. Eleanor's laughter, light and mischievous, floated through the room as another thug yelped, tangled in a veil of floating curtains. Marvin stormed into the parlor, his predatory smile replaced by a scowl. "Jack, this farce ends now!" Before Jack could reply, Mabel appeared, her bright scarf swirling as she waved a finger with unexpected authority. "Now, Marvin, there's no need to be so rude. This inn has charm, ghostly charm." As if on cue, ghostly illusions flickered around the room. Chairs shifted positions, portraits blinked, and an ethereal melody played softly from nowhere. Marvin blinked, his frustration melting into confusion. "What is this?" he demanded, but his voice wavered. Jack stepped forward, his dry humor cutting through the tension. "Welcome to the Marley Inn, where even the ghosts have a sense of humor." The hired men, now thoroughly entangled in Eleanor's pranks and Jack's traps, stumbled and scrambled, their once intimidating presence reduced to comic spectacle. Laughter, both human and spectral, filled the halls, a triumphant chorus that echoed against the peeling wallpaper and cracked ceilings. As Marvin's forces retreated, tails between their legs, Jack felt a surge of hope. He and Eleanor exchanged a glance that spoke volumes. This battle was won, but the war for the inn's soul was far from over. "We did it," Jack said, voice low but steady. "And just in time for breakfast," Eleanor quipped, her form shimmering with delight. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, illuminating the Marley Inn in a glow that seemed both ordinary and magical. The ghosts had proven their worth, and Jack's gamble on laughter and chaos had paid off. But as the last echoes of conflict faded, a question lingered in the air. In a world so quick to judge the unusual, how long could this fragile harmony last? How many battles would Jack and his spectral friends have to fight to keep their home safe? For now, though, there was only victory and the promise of new beginnings, a testament to the power of friendship, resilience, and the irrepressible joy found amidst even the most unexpected hauntings. And somewhere, deep within the walls, Eleanor's laughter danced like a beacon, inviting all who dared to join the merry chaos of the Marley Inn. The sun had barely risen when the first sign of trouble appeared. Jack's fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the last of the barricades in the main hallway. Tommy was crouched nearby, tying a length of rope between two ancient chairs, his face set in a mask of determined mischief. "You think this'll work?" Jack asked, eyeing the trap with a mixture of skepticism and hope. "If it doesn't, at least it'll make them slip and fall in style," Tommy replied with a grin. From the corner of his eye, Jack caught the flicker of a shimmering figure. Eleanor hovered near the staircase, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Time to bring out the big guns," she whispered. The hired men approached, their footsteps echoing ominously. One stepped on the rope, arms flailing as he crashed into a pile of old cushions. Another yelped as a ghostly hand seemed to tug his jacket, sending him sprawling into the dusty floorboards. Marvin's furious shouts were muffled by the rising chorus of chaos. In the midst of the commotion, Mabel appeared, her voice ringing clear and bright. "You boys might want to rethink your strategy! This inn's got a mind of its own." Jack seized the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Marley Inn's grandest attraction, the Haunted Havoc experience." Laughter erupted, mingling with the spectral giggles that fluttered through the room like invisible butterflies. Marvin's face twisted in rage, but even he couldn't suppress a begrudging smile as a chair suddenly spun on its own, narrowly missing his polished shoes. The battle had become a comedy, and the comedy was winning. As the last of Marvin's men fled, tangled in curtains and cursing their luck, Jack felt the weight of despair lift from his shoulders. The Marley Inn was alive, vibrant, and defiantly unyielding. "To victory," Jack said, raising an imaginary glass. To laughter, Eleanor echoed, her form glowing warmly. And outside, the world waited, ready to be charmed by the tales of ghosts, giggles, and the inn that refused to die. But the night held its own surprises. As Jack sat by the fireplace, the glow casting flickering shadows across his face, Eleanor drifted close. "You did well today," she said softly. "Couldn't have done it without you," Jack replied, tired but triumphant. "The inn is more than bricks and mortar," Eleanor mused. "It's a home, a family living and not so living." Jack nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle in his chest like a warm ember. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." Eleanor smiled, a radiant beam of light in the dim room. "Together," she agreed. Outside, the stars blinked knowingly, as if winking at the promise of more laughter, more chaos, and more stories yet to be told at the Marley Inn. The morning sun spilled generously over the Marley Inn, casting golden hues across its weathered facade that had seen better days, but now gleamed with a renewed spirit. Jack Marley stood on the creaky wooden porch, hands resting on the railing, a broad grin splitting his face. Around him, the once empty courtyard buzzed with life. Guests young and old mingled with ease, their laughter weaving seamlessly with the soft whispers and occasional playful giggles of the spectral residents. The air was thick with a buoyant energy that seemed to glow brighter than the sun itself. "Well, it'll be," murmured Tommy, Jack's rug best friend, clapping him on the back so hard Jack nearly lost his balance. "You did it. Mate, you actually did it." Jack chuckled, brushing a stray lock of tousled brown hair from his forehead. "We did it," he corrected, glancing over his shoulder at Eleanor, who hovered nearby, her translucent form shimmering faintly in the morning light. She floated above a cluster of children, her vintage dress fluttering as she deftly lifted a few harmless objects, a teacup here, a silver spoon there eliciting delighted squeals and wide-eyed wonder. Eleanor's eyes met Jack's and she gave an impish wink. "I told you chaos could be charming." The inn's main lounge buzzed with a lively crowd. Mabel, the spirited retired tourist who had long championed the inn's ghostly charm, raised a glass high above her head. Her bright scarves caught the light, framing a face alight with gratitude and joy. "To Jack, and to all the wonderful spirits who call this place home." She toasted, her voice ringing clear and warm. "To laughter and friendship," Jack responded, clinking his glass against hers, his heart swelling with a warmth that no financial success alone could have matched. Sally, the local historian who had once been skeptical, but now served as an enthusiastic guide, adjusted her glasses and leaned in to whisper a fascinating tidbit about the inn's history to a group of fascinated guests. Her voice, a blend of scholarly reverence and genuine affection, added layers of depth to the ghost tours that had become the heart of the inn's appeal. Beyond the windows, through the wrought iron gates, Marvin Delaney stood in stark contrast. Slick and sharply dressed as ever, his predatory smile was replaced by a look of grudging respect. The crowds that streamed past his luxury hotel en route to the Marley Inn were a silent testament to his failure to snuff out the spirited enterprise he had tried so hard to destroy. Jack caught Marvin's gaze and raised his glass in a silent salute, a gesture of victory that was both triumphant and compassionate. "May you find your own peace someday," he muttered under his breath, the words carrying a surprising note of empathy. As the day unfolded, the inn became a tapestry of joyous moments, Eleanor orchestrating playful hauntings that left guests doubled over with laughter, Mabel sharing stories of rediscovery and hope, Tommy fixing a stubborn door with a wink, and Jack, ever the witty and resourceful host, weaving it all together with a charm that had grown from desperation into genuine confidence. The Marley Inn was no longer a crumbling relic haunted by unseen mischief. It was a living, breathing community where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred in the best possible way. Here laughter was the language, chaos the dance, and acceptance the foundation. As twilight descended, lanterns flickered to life, casting warm pools of light that mingled with the soft glows of the ghosts. Jack stood once more on the porch, watching the happy faces of his guests and friends. The inn had survived its darkest hour, transformed by the very forces that once threatened it. "Looks like we're here to stay," he said to Eleanor, who drifted beside him, her eyes reflecting the twinkling stars above. "Forever and always," she replied with a ghostly grin. And with that, the Marley Inn embraced its future, a beacon of joyful resilience, where laughter echoed through the veil, and the impossible found a home. But as the last guest departed for the evening, Jack's mind danced with possibilities. How to keep this delicate balance? How to nurture the fragile harmony between chaos and order, between the spectral and the tangible? Tomorrow promised new challenges, new adventures, and undoubtedly more laughter. And Jack Marley, ever the optimist with a dry wit and an unshakable heart, was ready for all of it. The ghosts were too. After all, what was life or unlife without a little bit of mischief? Jack Marley took a deep breath, standing at the foot of the grand staircase that had seen better days, but now felt alive with a new kind of energy. The Marley Inn was no longer just a crumbling relic of his family's past. It was a beacon of laughter, stories, and uncanny charm. Around him, the group of tourists buzzed with excitement, their eyes wide as they hung on every word he spoke. Beside him, Eleanor's translucent form shimmered faintly, her vintage dress fluttering as she floated with a mischievous grin. "Welcome, brave souls, to the one and only Marley Inn, where the ghosts don't bite, but they do joke," Jack quipped, his dry humor lighting up the room. The guests erupted in laughter, the warmth of their joy washing over Jack like a balm. He gestured theatrically to Eleanor, who responded by causing a gentle breeze that ruffled the guests' hair and fluttered the curtains, eliciting delighted gasps. "And our lead poltergeist, Eleanor, promises to keep things lively but safe," Jack continued, his voice rich with pride and affection. Mabel, sitting near the roaring fireplace, wrapped snugly in her kaleidoscope of bright scarves, chuckled heartily. Her twinkling eyes reflected the flames as she leaned toward a fellow guest. "I haven't felt this alive in years," she whispered, her voice brimming with wonder. "This place is magic, not the scary kind, but the kind that makes your heart sing." Jack caught her gaze and gave a subtle nod, his own heart swelling. Mabel had been the first to believe in the inn's potential, and her enthusiasm had drawn others in like moths to a spectral flame. Later, as the crowd dispersed to explore the inn's nooks and crannies, Jack found himself in the dimly lit kitchen with Eleanor. The air was thick with the scent of brewing coffee and aged wood, a comforting contrast to the flickering shadows cast by the candlelight. "You're quite the showwoman, aren't you?" Jack said with a grin. Eleanor's form flickered with amusement. "Only when the audience is worthy," she replied, her voice a playful echo. They shared a laugh, a rare moment of calm amid the constant whirl of activity. Their banter had evolved from wary tolerance to genuine camaraderie. Jack felt a profound sense of belonging, bridging the worlds of the living and the spectral. Outside, under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, Tommy and Sally worked side by side, stringing ghost-themed decorations along the inn's weathered porch. Tommy's hands were steady and sure, his easygoing smile never fading. Sally, clutching a stack of carefully researched pamphlets, looked up and smiled at the growing crowd of visitors milling about. Who would have thought, Sally mused, that the Marley Inn would become the heart of the town's revival? Tommy chuckled, all thanks to Jack's crazy idea and a few friendly ghosts. As the evening deepened, the inn buzzed with laughter, whispered ghost stories, and the clinking of teacups. Jack stood back for a moment, watching as his guests mingled happily with the supernatural quirks that had once threatened to unravel his life. His stubbornness had paid off. He had found joy not in spite of the ghosts, but because of them. Yet, beneath the buoyant surface, Jack knew the balance was delicate. The ghost's antics, while endearing, could easily spiral out of control. Guests' expectations would continue to grow, and maintaining this harmony would require all his wit and charm. But for now, surrounded by laughter and ethereal light, Jack Marley embraced the new beginning. He had forged a future where chaos and camaraderie danced hand in hand, where the veil between worlds was not a barrier but a bridge. The Marley Inn was alive, and so was Jack's spirit, ready for whatever came next. Next stop, Jack whispered to Eleanor with a conspiratorial wink, a ghostly gala to remember, ready to stir up some more mischief. Eleanor's laughter echoed softly, a sound both haunting and joyful, always. And with that, the inn pulsed with life once more, where laughter pierced the veil and new stories waited to be told. The sun was dipping low behind the hills, casting the Marley Inn in a warm amber glow, the kind of light that made even the peeling paint and crooked sign seem charming rather than sorry. Jack Marley stood on the creaky wooden porch, his hands stuffed deep into the pockets of his worn jacket, eyes tracing the familiar outlines of the building he'd inherited from his parents. He could hear the faint, mischievous laughter of Eleanor weaving through the air, as if the very walls were still alive with the ghost's antics. It had been quite a journey to arrive here, far from the desperate, doubtful man who'd first hatched the madcap plan to turn a haunted ruin into a tourist attraction. Now, that same chaos was his lifeblood, his reason to smile. Taking a deep breath, Jack let the evening breeze ruffle his tousled brown hair, the scent of damp earth and fading roses mingling with the faintest trace of old wood smoke. The ghosts were restless tonight, Eleanor especially, her translucent form flickering like a candle flame in the twilight. She floated through the garden, swirling her vintage dress in a ghostly pirouette that caught the fading light and scattered it like fractured rainbows. "You quite the show off," Jack muttered, a dry grin tugging at his lips. "Try not to scare the guests too much tonight." Eleanor's laughter tinkled like wind chimes, a sound both ethereal and warmly familiar. "Scare them? Never! Just keep them on their toes." Inside, the parlor was alive with the hum of contentment. Mabel, wrapped in her bright scarves, sat comfortably in an overstuffed armchair, her eyes twinkling as she watched Eleanor's graceful dance. The retired tourist who had once arrived wide-eyed and unsure was now a beacon of enthusiasm, her spirited laughter filling the room and lighting even the darkest corners. "You've come a long way, Jack," Mabel said, her voice gentle but firm. "This place, it's magic. Not just the ghosts, but the people, the stories, the laughter." Jack chuckled, feeling a warmth that had little to do with the crackling fire. Magic's a good word for it. Chaos might be better, but I'll take whatever keeps the lights on. Tommy bustled through the doorway, toolbox in hand, his easy smile a steady anchor amid the supernatural storm. All fixed up out back. Don't want another ghost-induced plumbing disaster. Jack shook his head, amused despite himself. Thanks, mate. Couldn't do this without you. Sally, ever the historian, adjusted her glasses and stepped forward, holding a stack of freshly printed brochures detailing the inn's colorful past. The town's starting to come around. Even the skeptics are curious now. Your ghost tours have given this old place a new heartbeat. At that moment, the distant rumble of an engine broke the comfortable quiet. Jack's gaze flicked to the road where the silhouette of a sleek limousine faded into the night Marvin Delaney's retreating shadow. The defeated titan of corporate greed finally beaten back by laughter, friendship, and a little spectral mischief. The ghosts had played their part, of course, turning intimidation into slapstick, threats into pratfalls, and fear into fascination. Jack's stubborn optimism had fused with their playful chaos to create something utterly unique, something that no amount of money or menace could dismantle. As the last visitors of the evening gathered for the final ghost tour, Jack took his place at the front, voice steady and warm. The path wound through the garden, now twinkling with fairy lights and alive with the soft murmur of eager guests. Eleanor flitted nearby, orchestrating harmless scares and delightfully eerie moments that drew gasps and laughter in equal measure. Jack's narration wove dry wit with heartfelt history, turning each spectral tale into a celebration rather than a fright. The night air was thick with a joyful electricity, the kind that comes from shared stories and the unexpected bonds forged in the face of uncertainty. Jack caught a glimpse of Mabel's beaming face, Tommy's reassuring nod, and even Sally's reluctant smile. They were no longer just visitors or helpers, they were part of this living, laughing community. Later, as the crowds dispersed and the inn settled into a hushed calm, Jack found himself near the fireplace, where Eleanor's ghostly form hovered. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows across her delicate features, and for once, the mischief in her eyes softened into something like affection. "You've come a long way, Jack Marley," she said, her voice a melodious whisper that seemed to echo from another time. "So have you," he replied, his smile genuine and tired. "Funny thing about ghosts, turns out they're the best company when you learn to laugh with them." Eleanor's laughter drifted like a gentle breeze through the room. "And you, my friend, have finally found your home." Jack looked around the room, the worn furniture, the flickering candlelight, the faint traces of laughter and whispers all around him. It wasn't perfect. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and a little bit mad, but it was alive, and it was theirs. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Jack felt a buoyant resilience settle in his chest, a joy not born of ease or certainty, but of acceptance and friendship. The Marley Inn was no longer just a crumbling building haunted by restless spirits. It was a place of laughter through the veil, a beacon for the curious and the brave. A home where the living and the dead could find common ground in the most unexpected of places. And as he closed the door behind him, the faintest chuckle echoed softly in the night, a promise that the story was far from over. After all, Jack mused aloud, what's life without a little haunting?